Actual message from a real estate investor friend of mine. Beau, I've made best and final about a dozen times but never won a deal. Question, how does it look to brokers when I submit offers which never seem to be high enough? I'm afraid I'll be seen as a tire kicker and brokers won't want to work with me. In this video, we're going to attack that message. Stick around. Let's go! In order to properly answer that question, I've got to ask lots of questions. First, I'll have to assume that this investor is well qualified or they wouldn't have made it to the best and final round. But to make sure we cover all the bases, I need to know the qualifications of the investor. You see, the offer might have been good enough to get to best and final, but when compared with others, if their qualifications are not as high as the others, they're not going to get chosen. Qualifications like how many units does the investor own, particularly how many of those units are owned in the market of the listing. That kind of thing shows a higher probability of that person closing if they get to contract. Do they have a proof of funds, which could be a screenshot of bank accounts or simply a letter from a CPA or a lender saying they're qualified to buy a transaction like this? Has that investor produced any kind of references from other brokers or other investors that they've done deals with? Most importantly, have all these things actually been communicated to the listing broker? The listing broker may know you from previous offers you've made, but if you've never actually made them feel confident in your ability to close through experience of owning other units, proof of funds, recommendations from mutual brokers that they may know and other investors, then they're likely not going to talk you up to the sellers to choose you as the winning bidder. Another good tip, especially if you're losing a call for offers or you lose a best and final, is to simply ask the broker every single time what it is you could have done to have bettered your deal, to have been picked for the deal. This way you're sharpening your knife after every deal and getting better and better, which increases the probability of winning subsequent deals. Now, let's assume that you have properly communicated your qualifications with the listing broker, and you've learned through previous deals of not winning that price seems to be your problem. Have you gone back to see what that property sold for a couple months later to plug that price into your model to see how that changed your returns? If you find out that that price was within your strike range that you could have met and satisfied your returns, you messed up. I see it all the time that buyers try to just pay enough to win it instead of paying the most they can pay to ensure they win it. Now, if you find out that the closing price was the same price you offered, then you've got some questions you can begin to ask the broker on what it was besides price that made the other investor better than you. Now, on the flip side, if you discover that the sale price was way above anything you would have paid, then you did everything right. I tell buyers all the time, if you lose the deal and see the price they closed at, you want to think that buyer is nuts for paying that price because you can't figure out how the heck they're going to make that work. Now, another factor in trying to win best and finals is how aggressive were you in trying to portray to the listing broker how bad you want it. Now, this requires a little bit of finesse so you don't go overboard, but I've been in situations as a listing broker where I have a number of offers that are very similar, and the buyer who showed the most aggression at wanting to win that deal won the deal. Now, here's where the finesse comes in. You don't want to call the listing broker every 30 minutes saying, have I won it, have I won it, have I won it? But you're communicating to the broker with enough frequency that makes them feel like, God, this guy really wants to close on this deal. The buyers who are calling me and saying, Beau, have you heard from the seller yet? Beau, has the seller made a decision yet? We can't wait to close. We've already talked to our remodeling guys. We've already talked to our property managers about post-renovation rents. We've already talked to our lender. They can't wait to fund us. Beau, our investors are ready to write us checks. All things being equal, if the other bidders never reached out to me and never made a peep, that can make a difference. Now remember, I'm still building a storyline to answer the question from the beginning of the video about whether or not brokers will take you seriously if you continue to lose best and finals. So the next question I'm asking that investor is, did you tour the asset? Now, I realize on every initial offer, you can't visit every single asset, especially when they're out of state. But if you've been chosen to go to best and final, that time period between the call for offers, in which you've made it to the best and final, and the best and final is usually anywhere from 1 to 5 days. You absolutely want to hop on a plane and get in front of that broker to tour the asset. Unless you're already intimately familiar with that exact asset or have toured it with the listing broker in the past or whatever the case may be, you want to tour that asset with the broker so that the broker, when they're reviewing all the offers with the seller, can tell that seller, this person has been on the property, they've touched it, tasted it, smelled it, all that. Another question I would ask that investor at the beginning of this video is, are your deals conditioned on financing? Oftentimes, if your price and other terms are good enough to get to a best and final, the listing broker and seller will overlook in that first round that your deal was conditioned on financing. But in the best and final, if there are other offers who do not have their offer conditioned on financing, there you go. Next question, when you didn't win the deal, how did you act? When you lose a deal, whether it's the call for offers or best and final, your goal is to be positive. You still want to be complimentary and gracious. You want to win that broker. You want the broker to start rooting for you on the next deal. I'll give you a personal example. There's one investor I can think of that submitted numerous offers over the course of a number of months. He was qualified and his offers were pretty decent, but we just couldn't get a deal done together. But what I loved was how positive he always was. He would say to me, Beau, don't worry about it, man. We're going to get one done together. I can't wait to do a deal with you. He would say, I can feel it. The next one, we're going to win it. The next one, we're going to win it. And he would compliment me on the way I handled the process and my marketing materials and how cordial I was and the things that I put out. He would on occasion even write an email to me and ask me to forward it to the seller saying thank you for the process and how good the property looked and how he liked this part of the property and how the seller remodeled this portion and how the clubhouse looked. And it was just really encouraging. He basically got me wanting to fight for him on the next deals. And of course, it wasn't long after that when we got our first deal done together, and it's been a home run asset for him. And now on subsequent deals that he goes after, not only can I talk about the quality of person he is to my seller, but that he's a closer. Will brokers take you seriously if you continue to lose best and final deals over and over again? The answer is yes and no. If you've communicated your qualifications to the listing broker, you've implemented changes to your offers based on the knowledge you've learned from the listing brokers on the deals you've lost, that you're offering prices that are good enough to win, that you've showed how bad you've wanted it along the process, that you've toured the deal at some point in the process, and that you've remained positive and encouraging after you've lost a deal, then I promise you, brokers are not going to think you're a tire kicker. In fact, they're going to want to do deals with you. They're going to fight for you on the next deal. Conversely, if you still haven't actually communicated to the broker that you're qualified to close on this deal, that you haven't implemented any of the changes the brokers have encouraged you to do after you lost the deal, that your offer prices are never nearly high enough, if you're putting off a vibe that you could care less whether you win or not, that you've never set foot on the property, or that you go silent after losing the deal, then yeah, the broker's probably going to think you're a tire kicker. And they're certainly not going to put their neck on the line to encourage the seller to pick you if you're not one who's going to close on the deal. And I'll end with this big tip. Strong is your networking game before the next listing even comes up. How often are you communicating with those brokers in between listings? How are you adding value or useful information to their lives without asking anything in return? The best investors I know that outperform everybody else year after year, up or down markets, are those who are networking with the most number of brokers in an automated cadence that is nonstop. They're developing strong business relationships, but also strong friendships with these folks. You see, every best and final to a listing broker and seller comes down to which buyer is most likely to close on the deal at the right price and terms. And that boils down to two things. How does that buyer look on paper, i.e. their actual offer and qualifications? And two, how does the listing broker and seller feel about that buyer here and here? If this video brought you some value, please hit the like button down below. Make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell so you're made aware of our videos each week. See you guys in the next one.